I'd love to talk about what on earth is going on with the Scottish Parliament at the moment, the Scottish Government, SNP, etc. We will take some calls on this today too. So yesterday, Scotland's First Minister Humza Yousaf ended a power-sharing agreement between the SNP and the Scottish Greens after the Greens wouldn't back him over his watering down of Scotland's climate change policies.
The Butte House Agreement was intended to provide stability to the Scottish Government, and it has made possible a number of achievements. But it has served its purpose. It's no longer guaranteeing a stable arrangement in Parliament. The events of recent days have made that clear.
Humza Yousaf probably hoped that would appease some of his own party, but he may not have been prepared for the response from the Scottish Greens, who immediately hit out at him. And they say his decision can't come without consequences. So the fallout has led to the other parties in Scotland saying there needs to be a vote of no confidence in Humza Yousaf. Could he lose his job over that, Aisha? You know.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, well, he wouldn't. It could be, but I thought it's like impeachment in the States now. You just brush it off.
Well, I don't think it's sustainable to have lost a vote of no confidence. And of course, what people forget as well in Scotland is that the SNP doesn't have an overall majority. The numbers are incredibly tight. So even if everybody in his own party voted for him, the only person that can save him and get him over the line is a woman called Regan, who stood against him during the leadership contest last summer. He, of course, won.
Now, hang on, I'm not interrupting you deliberately, but I just, because Alba then started laughing, shall we get Alba to explain the significance of Regan?
I just feel like I want to get the popcorn out because it is absolutely hilarious. This is what it must have been like when the Conservative Party was going through all of that turmoil with Boris Johnson and Liz Truss. This is what it must have been like from the outside. And my goodness gracious me, is it exciting and entertaining to watch. So Regan is one of the people who ran against Humza Yousaf after Nicola Sturgeon was deposed in the Scottish leadership campaign. Kate Forbes was the other lady that ran. Now, Kate Forbes and Humza Yousaf came very close to each other when it came to how many votes they got in the leadership election, but Regan, she lost very badly. And she then defected to the Alba party, which is Alex Salmond's party, who, of course, is the former First Minister of Scotland. Lots of people know Alex Salmond, but Alex Salmond really doesn't like Humza Yousaf and doesn't like what the SNP has become, doesn't like all of their obsession with this gender policy. And so the reason it's so significant that Regan holds almost the power in this situation is because when Regan left the SNP to join the Alba party, Humza Yousaf said it's no great loss that Regan's left. So it's it feels like something from Mean Girls, but it's politics.
But this is why I love politics. In the end, it's just about a bunch of people fighting like ferrets in a sack.
It is. But what is also extraordinary is Regan went from sort of being persona non grata to yesterday becoming the most powerful woman in Scottish politics. And she is writing a letter with her demands. And as Alba said, a lot of this is around kind of gender policy. She wants to shore up women's sex-based rights. But Humza Yousaf's in a real bind now because if he gives in to Regan, he looks incredibly weak because he and her were not at all aligned in their politics. And also, what people are saying, if he gives in to her kind of puppet master is Alex Salmond. So Alex Salmond's going to be sort of controlling things behind it. If he loses this vote of no confidence, it's going to be mayhem. Many people are speculating that what he might have to do is just resign. And then the SNP can have another leadership contest. Probably Kate Forbes would win that. But there is a big but in all of this. Because the SNP doesn't have a majority, whoever takes over from Humza Yousaf, it's going to be very difficult for them to get legislation over the line because they don't have a majority.
OK, I gather it's 64 SNP seats and 63 others, plus
Yeah.
So, Ash is now the kingmaker, possibly. Well, we'll talk about Scottish independence. And I suppose the big thing for you to call us about, if you'd like to call today, I hope you do, is whether this is curtains. What do you think? Briefly.
For Scottish independence? No, I mean, it's still a very popular movement in Scotland. I think it's probably moved further back in time. But you look at the younger generations in Scotland, the polling people around my age, Scottish independence is still very much something that they want. And I don't think it's over for Scottish independence.
It may be that this generation of SNP can't deliver it. So we just gathered that Humza Yousaf he'd scheduled for a while, he's making a speech this lunchtime about the joys of independence. He's just cancelled it. So, yes. So it's all kicking off, as they say. We'd love your calls on this, 0207 862. It was a tumultuous day for the Scottish National Party yesterday after the First Minister announced he would end a power-sharing agreement and lead a minority government instead. So let's just contemplate how things have changed. For years, the SNP's view of Scotland was of a nation under their total control. And then this. And the lightning strikes have just come and come and come for the governing party. So let's just look at them. Oh, look at the scorch mark there. This is them abandoning their flagship climate goal. That's what cheesed the Greens off, isn't it? Then the look at that, the trans row, the Isla Bryson case. I think we have to call her she. I don't know whether we do or not. He, whatever. Basically a male rapist who dressed as a woman for court, and they wanted to put her initially in a woman's prison. Legal issues I can't talk about, to do with the SNP leading figures, police investigations, that's going to a court. But there's other stuff as well. We mentioned the ferries. There's a bolt of lightning for the ferries. They had to renew the fleet of ferries. This will sound like a long way away if you're not in the north of Scotland, but they've had all the services disrupted for the Scottish Islands for a long old time now. And there's other stuff. Again, seems like a detail, but it's all built up. So there's a flash of lightning for what's called the deposit return scheme, returning bottles that all got a bit too bureaucratic. And I suppose we could do this with all governments, can't we? After a while, Aisha, you could say you've got 25 different things going wrong, but they've got 26.
Yeah, it does feel like the party is over for the SNP in Scotland. And it's extraordinary because since that 2015 general election when Labour lost all but one MP in Scotland, and even since sort of before that, the SNP has just dominated Scottish politics for such a long time. You had two big figures, Alex Salmond and then Nicola Sturgeon. And when Nicola Sturgeon and Alex Salmond were there, they really did feel they were unassailable. It was very, very hard for any opposition party to really land a glove on either of them. Whatever you think about their politics and about independence, they were formidable politicians. They were kind of behemoths in Scottish politics. They were really good communicators. And then it all fell apart so quickly. You had first of all, you had a big row between Nicola Sturgeon and Alex Salmond. You then had Nicola Sturgeon, this big row over the gender stuff, as you say. She then resigned. It was a big surprise. And since then, everything has just been collapsing. And this coalition with the Greens was actually very good for the Greens because the Greens actually pushed a lot of their agenda through. You went through some of it there. It's been very bad for the SNP brand. They tried to move things too quickly, too fast, and Humza Yousaf has now kind of handled things quite badly. I was speaking to a former senior advisor. They said there was a way for this agreement to come to an end without it being so acrimonious and public.
It is with the Greens, Alba. It's a bit like when you find you reckon your girlfriend's about to dump you, so you get in the day before and you dump her. It is like that, isn't it?
Well, it is like that.
It's always childish.
The target that the Greens made the SNP agree to, this reducing 75% of emissions by 2030, was just found to be unrealistic and unobtainable. So actually, it was sensible for the Scottish Government to say, well, we can't meet that target. It's just impossible within the technology and the finance that we have currently. We can't reach that goal. So they actually did something sensible. But I think what this actually exposes is that actually the SNP needed big figures like Alex Salmond or Nicola Sturgeon to keep together what is actually quite a weak coalition of people where the main thing they agree on is independence. I mean, how can a party where you have someone who is essentially a conservative, Kate Forbes, in the same party as someone like Humza Yousaf, who would be considered on the far left of the Labour Party?
Of course, they have had a split, and we could talk to somebody now on the other side of it. So Alex Salmond's Alba party split off, essentially, from the SNP. We can speak to their Westminster leader, the MP, Neil Hanvey. So, Neil, welcome. Thanks for coming on. What's the dynamic? What goes on next?
Well, I mean, it's been an extraordinary 24 hours, that's absolutely for sure. And I don't think when Humza Yousaf woke up yesterday morning, he anticipated that the events would happen in the way that they did. And he started off yesterday trying to assert himself as a strong leader. And he's ended the 24 hours a much diminished figure in Scottish politics. But I think the fundamental thing that's become crystal clear is that the Scottish Green Party have made it absolutely clear that the environment is not a red line for them. That's a mirage. that independence is also, their commitment to independence is also a mirage. The only thing that really got under the skin of the Green Party was the implementation of the cash review recommendations in Scotland and the implications that had for their queer theory identity politics crusade. So, I mean, the Green Party are probably the biggest casualties in all of this because they've really shown their hand. Now, in terms of the independence movement, independence support is still somewhere north of 50% in Scotland. The frustration for many people in the independence movement is that the SNP have failed to progress. The case for independence has become completely distracted by this cul-de-sac of identity politics.
But surely part of the reason, Neil, is that the Alba party is basically split off from the SNP. You've got this thing, I suppose, like the Conservatives, the Reform lot have split off, and they're now attacking them from the left.
Well, our position's pretty straightforward. We want to see a return to a focus and commitment on the case for Scottish independence. We want to see women's sex-based rights, LGBT people's sex-based rights, and the protection of children in schools and other places prioritised. And also, we'd really like to see a return of competence to government. And that return of competence comes when you shift your focus away from niche side issues such as identity politics and focus clearly on those priorities, which are the true priorities of the people of Scotland.
Albi wants to come in. Albi wants to talk to Alba. Let's do it, because you're thinking this trans thing keeps coming up.
Well, it keeps coming up, but he talks about you want to return to competence from the SNP. You used to be an SNP MP. Some people would argue, when have the SNP ever been competent? The education quality in Scotland is not good. You see all of this business with drug deaths. There are so many metrics in Scotland where it underperforms compared to England and the rest of the country. And you're talking about a return to competence. Was there ever competence?
Yes. So, well, I take the SNP's time in government in two separate portions. So the first half was led by Salmond. And Alec did an outstanding job, first in a minority government, a minority of 47, I think it was, MSPs, but he was able to understand the politics of working in a minority and working across the broad political spectrum to achieve consensus on key issues. And that's how you operate in a minority government in
okay. All right. I want to just let Aisha in before we thank you, Neil. So go ahead.
Neil, on the bigger question of the independence movement, I mean, you're right, the figures are quite high still for support for independence, particularly amongst younger people. But the confidence of an SNP government to deliver independence feels like it's further away than ever. Isn't the reality that even though people want independence, they're not going to get it for a long time?
Well, I mean, I take your point, and yes, it's really important. And one of the great frustrations that led me to leave the SNP was because of a range of issues, particularly around their focus and commitment to independence. But the desire for independence is extremely strong in Scotland, and we saw in 2015 how swiftly politics can change in Scotland. We went from 41 Labour MPs to one in a single general election. So the Scottish people will put their backing behind a party if they believe that their commitment is to deliver independence.
Okay.
And the biggest problem the SNP have is that nobody believes that that's their focus any longer.
All right. Thank you, Neil, so much for joining us from the Alba party. Neil Hanvey, just discussing this extraordinary situation in Scotland where the SNP is suddenly not cracking up, but having a big problem, being struck by lightning. Ian's in Inverness. We've got calls from all over Scotland, which is brilliant. Ian, what do you think? Is the independence dream over?
It's never been real anyway, let's be honest. It's under the SNP, we're never going to get independence.
Well, it came close in 2014.
They've that for 19 years. They've had 19 years in power and they've just made an absolute hash. If they'd gone and they'd done some decent politics, we'd be independent now. And they've just thrown it away. But being an election year, the important thing for the SNP is, do they want to save seats in Westminster and get rid of Yousaf, or do they want to keep Yousaf and sacrifice seats in Westminster? That's how I see it.
Do you think, just give me a quick answer, do you think Yousaf will be gone by the weekend?
I think if he takes the hint, he has to go to save seats in Westminster, and I'm sure the Westminster MPs will be prodding him to say, time's up on your bike.
Okay, just suddenly bringing back an image of him, I think, falling off. It wasn't a bike, was it? It was a scooter.
I think he hurt his leg or something like that.
Okay, let's pause there. We'll have a break. We'll take more calls. And it's great that we've got so many calls from all over Scotland. We're just asking whether the independence dream is over. So Sturgeon went. We can't talk about any of the legal stuff. But there's Humza Yousaf in the middle who fell off his scooter. And now he's fallen out of love with the Greens. So that's ended. They had the Isla Bryson, the trans row. Trans row, it's a big issue there with Alba. I mean, I said that Alba were attacking them from the left. I was wrong. It's from the right.
Yeah, it's very interesting.
It's a different. I got it completely wrong. Sean is in Edinburgh. Hi, Sean.
Hello.
So, what do you think of what's happening for a start?
What's happening is, the SNP, they're sort of unfurling a bit. But you seem to think that if the SNP aren't strong, that the call for independence isn't strong. The call for independence is very, very, very much on. It's sort of in the balance. It's a bit like your politics in England is about whether you're left or right, and it's in the balance of whatever you are. In Scotland, the big issue is, do you want independence or do you not? And the SNP failing in the polls doesn't mean that we're not in a strong position to still shout for independence.
Don't you need a pro-independence party to be dominant in Scotland to get a referendum to trigger independence? That's what you need, don't you?
Yes, and that does put us on the back foot. But we didn't just have one party that's pro-independence. The split for the Greens. The Greens are still pro-independent.
Good point.
Alba is a pro-independent party.
Good point.
It's about the people that are voting and how they are in thing.
Is it not though? So, Sean, you're pro-independence yourself. Is it not that since 2014, where you nearly won it, that actually people have got warier because of the financial crisis and COVID and Brexit, and thinking this is it's another leap?
Yes, I would think it's a leap the opposite way for what you're thinking, because these factors tie into people's living and how they're living, and it hones on your views on politics, because Westminster politics isn't working for people in Scotland.
Yeah,
people in Scotland need Scottish politics to work for them, and the SNP have only ever been a vessel to get there.
Right.
If you want rid of the SNP, give us independence, because the SNP couldn't survive in an independent Scotland. There's too many people with different thoughts within that party.
Okay, thank you. Well, when you say Westminster politics doesn't work for Edinburgh, Westminster politics probably doesn't work for Lambeth.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Thank you, Sean.
But also there is an increasing argument in Scotland that Holyrood politics doesn't work for the whole of Scotland. You speak to the people in the Islands and Highlands, they feel really disconnected.
As you know what, we on Radio 2 we covered that ferries story, and it's the first time I'd really been exposed to what that failure to renew the ferries fleet has done to so many people on the outskirts of on the islands, basically. Elizabeth's in Edinburgh as well. Hi, Elizabeth.
Hi, good morning.
Is the independence dream over now?
Yes, I hope so. And I was listening to your last caller when he was talking about the support for independence, but the SNP have been in power now for a good number of years, and they haven't actually made Scotland, I would say, better. If anything, under Nicola Sturgeon, Scotland actually didn't do very well. It was probably better under Alex Salmond. But when we look at their independence, they've no idea about what currency we're going to have, what about our pensions, how we're going to survive, because we have the Barnett formula. Scotland does get plenty of money. The current SNP don't manage those finances well. And I was listening to a programme on Wednesday night, Debate Night, which is about Scotland. Mm-hmm. And there was Sandy Begbie spoke about the fact that the SNP government are not investing in the economics of Scotland. So it's all very well saying, if only we were independent. We actually have to know how we would manage ourselves with independence. All
right, thank you, Elizabeth. We're gonna just allow me to head west from Edinburgh to Lanarkshire and Alexander. Do you agree with that, Alexander?
No, Jeremy, I totally disagree with that. I cannot believe what planet the lady was on, speaking to you there just now. We had a massive problem here with the ferry. We got to own that problem. It was a disgrace. It's been terribly managed. It's abysmal. But you know what? You know what, Jeremy? See, when these ferries eventually launch, they won't launch into 6 feet of excrement because the water is polluted like you have in the Thames.
Well, you raise a good point. Oh, but that's the fun enough. You could say that the excrement is the answer, is an argument against independence because, we all share the waters around the British Isles, right? And going independent doesn't make your water cleaner.
You're totally wrong, Jeremy. Your water companies in England are privately owned.
I appreciate that. But at least if you're not independent, you can put pressure on Westminster to sort that out.
Well, why would we need to sort it out, Jeremy? Because our water companies here are nationalised. When we pay into the system here, the money comes back.
You raise a good point.
The money comes back to the public purse. It doesn't go to the Cayman Islands.
Listen, there's a very good. The water companies thing is the Conservatives might be their biggest historic failure. Do you think?
Look, I think
your party.
I think privatisation. Looking back at it, 30 years on, there are obviously elements of privatisation where it has failed. But I worry sometimes that if we think about British Rail, which is the most recent thing that we're talking about, where it might be taken back into public ownership, if Labour get back into power, I think we're at risk of maybe romanticising what it was like when all of these utilities were under public.
What do you think of the argument, though, that sewage is an argument for Scotland going independent?
I don't think there are any arguments for Scotland going independent, to be quite frank. I am a unionist.
We do share the water, that's the problem.
We do share the water. I mean, I do get independence personally, but as a Brexiteer, the arguments for independence are actually quite similar to Brexit, and the arguments for remaining within the United Kingdom are actually quite similar to remaining in the European Union, which is why I find it quite interesting that you have the SNP, which is this pro-EU party that wants to exit the United Kingdom, and you have the Conservatives, this pro-Brexit party.
Well, look, ironically, the SNP needs Westminster to thrive in Scotland because the SNP can blame everything that's going wrong on what's happening in Westminster, and that boosts their popularity.
That's so interesting. OK, we've got to follow this story and see what happens in Scotland. Fascinating.